Welcome to Can I Get a Witness? This is a podcast brought to you from The Witness, Inc., where we amplify Black brilliance at the intersection of Jesus, joy, and justice. I'm Danielle Mark, and I have the privilege of serving as president of The Witness. This podcast is an invitation to see, to hear, and to celebrate what God is doing through the lives of Black Christian leaders, artists, and thought leaders. Let's jump into today's episode. As a writer and thought leader, Tracey Michae'l Lewis-Giggetts offers those who read her work and hear her speak an authentic experience, an opportunity to explore the intersection of culture, identity, and faith at the deepest of levels. She is the host of the podcast HeARTtalk with Tracey Michae'l and founder of HeARTspace, a healing community created to serve those who have experienced trauma of any kind through the use of storytelling and the arts. As a writer, Tracey has published over 25 books, including several collaborations with numerous high-profile authors. Calling herself a literary midwife, this NY Times Bestselling author is a highly sought-after ghostwriter and collaborator whose work includes Feeding the Soul and I Did a New Thing by Tabitha Brown, Better Not Bitter by Yusef Salaam, Sideshow by Rickey Smiley, and many others. In 2021, Tracey became one of 20 writers who contributed to the groundbreaking book, You Are Your Best Thing, Vulnerability, Shame, Resilience, and the Black Experience, edited by acclaimed researcher Brene Brown and founder of the Me Too movement, Tarana Burke. In 2022, Tracey's critically acclaimed book, Black Joy, Stories of Resistance, Resilience, and Restoration, was published and in 2023 won the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work. Black Joy has received rave reviews from celebrities like Kerry Washington, literary authors like Kais Lehman and Disha Philyaw, and media outlets like Good Morning America, Essence Magazine, and USA Today. Tracey's book, Then They Came for Mine, Healing from the Trauma of Racial Violence, examines the source and impact of racial violence against Black people in all its forms and offers a blueprint for the way the Christian church can help facilitate healing. Then They Came for Mine has won the 2023 Wilbur Award, the highest honor given by Religion Communicators Council for excellence in the communication of religious issues, values, and themes in public media. Most recently, Tracey's dynamic journal and daily devotional, The Black Joy Playbook, 30 Days of Intentionally Reclaiming Your Delight, released on October 29th, 2024. Tracey has spoken on a number of platforms around the country on topics related to race, social justice, healing, and faith, as well as spirituality. Additionally, her freelance work has been published in print and online publications such as Oprah Daily, The Washington Post, Essence Magazine, The Guardian, The Chronicle for Higher Education, Ebony Magazine, TheRoot.com, and much more. Well, Tracey, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Truly our pleasure. You've written a lot of books. I think it's 23?
27.
27. Wow, that is a lot of books. I want to kind of go back to young Tracey before we, kind of talk about that part of your journey. What was life like for you?
Well, that means we have to go back to Louisville, Kentucky, where I was born and raised. And I was a different kid in all the ways that, a child can be different. Very talkative, very inquisitive, questioning everything. Even back then, I was a reader. I was just talking with someone about how I remember my mom had Essence Magazine and Ebony Magazine and Song of Solomon in my in the house, and even at like 8 and 9, 10, I'm trying to read, Danielle Steele, whatever she had, So I was very much a voracious reader, wanted to know more. But also I had some traumatic experiences in my childhood that led me to also feel as though my worth was very much tied to that seeking of knowledge, and that, okay, I can be the, raise my hand in Sunday school, and answer all the questions, because that's how I felt like I needed to define myself. And so that very early on, that sort of set the trajectory for me, even in high school, and so on, even in church. All of that was very much set by this idea that I needed to, in order to be loved and accepted, I needed to be the best. I needed to be the smartest in the room, which has its advantages and disadvantages, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So growing up in Louisville, Kentucky, what were some of the most cherished memories that you have from your childhood?
That's very interesting, because a lot of my memories have to center around family.
Yeah.
So there were the get-togethers at my great-grandmother's house every Sunday. She lived in this high-rise building that was across the street from a Greyhound station. So no matter who was coming in town, they would jump on that Greyhound and they'd be right there, and she'd have a pot of greens. Like, she would just randomly have a pot of greens and cornbread just available. Like, how you could show up at 2:00 in the morning and there'd be some greens and cornbread waiting for you. I don't know how she did it, but she was a storyteller. And so we would sit there and just listen to her tell stories of growing up in Alabama and sharecropping and that kind of thing. So those stand out to me. As a teenager, Shawnee Park and Chickasaw Park was the place that everybody went to on Sunday afternoons and hung out, and there were cars. And for Philly folks, the equivalent would have been the Plateau, right? Like, there was this, hanging out and music and community, right? It was my earliest senses of community. But my memories are often tainted with my desire to want to leave. My belief that there was something bigger and better out there than Kentucky. Yeah. That's shifted a lot for me since, but I can say that I was always positioning myself to, when I go away from here, when I get out of here, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. So there's that tension that we all hold, the joy and the pain, the joy and the grief, the good memories with the sense there's something else.
Yeah. That's good, because I think a lot of us feel that, or have felt that at some point within our developmental years. So when did you transition from Kentucky?
After college, after high school, I went to the University of Kentucky. Okay. And which was about an hour away from home. So it was sort of my transitional period to see what that would be like. And so graduated in 3.5 years. So I was flying through school because I wanted going straight through the summers to try to get to wherever I thought I was going. I didn't know. Because, of course, I had a plan and God had a plan.
I hear that, yes.
And I was on my plan. And God's like, okay, So my first stop was Chicago. So I moved with $300 in my pocket and a budget rental van filled with furniture that my grandmother had given me. And my mom had put together packages and everything. And I drove to the south side of Chicago and said, I'm here. Now, I don't know what I was there to do. But at that same time, I had really started writing more poetry, and I was thinking I could be, a deaf poet. And I was in that world doing poetry, reading spoken word, and also working in corporate America and thinking like, okay, I can do both. I can do my poetry and I'll work in corporate America and that would be my life. And then I'd meet someone and maybe have, get married, have a child, and that would be my life. And needless to say, it was much more winding than that.
Oh my goodness, isn't it interesting the path that we take?
Absolutely.
To get to where we are. What would you say you wanted to do through those developmental years as you're graduating high school, going into college? What was the dream that you had at first?
Yeah, I wish I could say that I just knew that I was going to be a writer, right? But I don't think that it was ever in the realm of possibility in my mind in that moment that, I could actually do this for a living, that this could be my job. So I always had other vision, right? So I knew I had an entrepreneurial spirit. I write about in one of my books about selling pine cones when I was like 3 years old to people outside of, I had an entrepreneurial spirit. So I knew I wanted to have my own business. I didn't quite know what that looked like. I went and got a whole MBA because I thought, okay, this is what I want to do. Moved from Chicago to North Jersey, the New York area, still being creative, still writing poetry, now writing plays, but never believing that that would be the thing that God would use that would be attached to my ultimate call. I just said, okay, this is my outlet. This is what I do. So the vision was always, okay, I was in PR at one point. I was working, for some of the top Fortune 500 companies at the time, in sales and marketing and relationship management. I just thought I would climb those ladders. Until it got to the point where post 9/11, I felt like life was too short. I actually worked in one of the World Trade Center buildings, was headed there that same day.
Wow.
And so it just shifted everything. So everything that I'd been creating and writing at that point in time sort of switched places with my corporate. And in hindsight, I can say thank God, but I got laid off from my corporate gig. And I took that little time and that unemployment and that, severance package and wrote a play that we produced in New York. And that was like, maybe I can.
Right.
And then as a way to sort of make money, I started teaching and I became an educator. Went on, moved to Philadelphia, got my MFA and started teaching writing.
Yeah. That's amazing. So where was God in all of this from when you were younger? Because it sounds like you were a part of church and church was a part of your rhythm. What was your spiritual life like?
So I say this all the time. My parents got saved when I was 11 and we started going to church and we did all the things. I was in the youth choir. We were in the I was in the young adult choir, the usher board, the Bible drill team. I wrote plays for Easter. I did the whole thing. And so interesting enough, God was seeding in me my creativity in those spaces, right? Because I was the one they called on, to come up with drill team, songs, right? And I was the one that, wrote plays and those kinds of things. So it was ever present. That's how I know God never left, but also sort of gave me the space to explore what his will would ultimately look like. You know how people say, I made that person think that they were in control. I feel like that's what God made her think that, she was in control of things. But, and I accepted, Christ very young, around 11 or 12 years old when my parents joined the church, was baptized, the whole Black Baptist church experience, right? But I don't know that I'd had a true encounter with Christ yet. That would come much later on. So I borrowed my parents' faith for a very long time. It was part of, I actually saw the transformation in their lives.
Wow.
And I said, okay, there's something to this.
Yeah.
And I wanted this stability that the church offered us. So, there's a lot I could say about poor theology and things that really framed my experience as a Black woman in ways that I had to unravel and undo. But the grace in it all was that I found a degree of awareness of God and the Holy Spirit, and also a sense of I could have a relationship with God in a way that I hadn't known prior to 11 years old. Right? I didn't know. We just went on like Christmas and Easter, and I didn't really understand. But it would take living a little bit and making poor decisions for me to come back around again and really have a true encounter with Christ, where I really felt deeply that I was being called and compelled to a life that he was giving me. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's good. That's good. When did you start to experience that encounter with God? What was that shifting point where everything changed from as an observer to partnering?
I would honestly say when I moved from the northern New Jersey area to Philadelphia, now 21 years ago, that I think that was the beginning. There were situations that I faced where I was forced to my knees, right? And forced to surrender. It really was an act of surrender. It was this idea that, okay, I've done it my way. Clearly, I ain't getting it right. So God, maybe I should try it your way. And even then, like in the course of those 21 years, because of my issues around anxiety and post-traumatic stress syndrome, my tendency is to try to be in control, to keep myself safe, right? My central nervous system says, we can't, I know God told you to do that, but we can't do that because we remember what happened when we got hurt the last time. And so I'm always in this push-pull of like telling those parts of me, I love you. I understand where you're coming from. I'm not knocking it. I get why you're saying that. But you know what? I got this. God's got this. We're going to be all right. And so I would say, my early 30s, my late 20s, early 30s, I really started shifting to, okay, God. And as I did that, my life shifted. So that it's true. Once you surrender, God shows up in a way, not that he's not been there, but God shows up in a way because you've expanded yourself in a way to give him space to move.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And in previous times, I felt like God was orchestrating, keeping me somewhat safe in my bad decisions, but I didn't really offer space for the Holy Spirit to actually move because I had all my stuff in the way, And once I did that, I began to see that work like speed forward in a way that changed my life.
Wow. So take us back to like that moment, that season where you're having this experience and you're embarking on healing. What was that process like to maybe even think through some of the things that you've been taught that as you found out with time, oh, that's not God, that's not Bible. And what did that look like for you?
I think one of the biggest things that came out of that time period was I'd been taught to shrink. I'd been, okay.
Okay. I get that. Yeah.
I'd been taught to be small. And I think in that season of my life, it was simply the Holy Spirit posing the question of what if I didn't make you small? What if I didn't create you? What if this gift that you have is not meant to be, right? And what if you trust me with this gift? Wow. And that was hard, and on a not so great day or two, even today, is hard to embrace because when you've been raised in an environment where women are taught to I mean, I grew up in a church where women weren't even allowed to walk in the pulpit, right? You know, they had to walk all the way. We had to walk all the way up into the choir stand in the back just to put. I have a stark memory of nurses, you know, dressed in all white. They weren't really nurses, child, but they was dressed in all white. There wasn't a nurse degree in any of them. But them mothers and them sisters had they all white on, and they would bring water to sit for the pastor, and they would come and bring it, but they had to walk all the way around because they weren't allowed as women to touch the velvet red carpet of the pulpit, right? And there's this dynamic that happens, but God said I was free, right? You know, and so I think I was already pushing up against that in a very secular way, like pushing up against that based on the books that I'd read, right? And the things that I had, you know, Alice Walker and Angela Davis, and sort of these movements that were saying something else. But in this particular season, I feel like God was showing it's not just Angela Davis and Alice Walker and this sort of womanist, feminist movement that's happening. Yeah. That's that. Yeah. But also there are the Deborahs and the you know what I mean? And the Marys and the Priscillas and all of these people that are that actually you know, you can be who I've called you to be a woman. So there was that factor. There was also my trauma had taught me to be small, you know? And so all throughout this time period, I'd say from the early 2000s, right before I got married, it felt like God was saying, give me that, and give me that, give me that too. and I was just like, I don't know. No, give me that, give me that, give me that. And so as I'm slowly releasing things, what's returning back to me is beyond my imagination. And that just seems to be how we deal with each other. Yeah. You know, he's like, well, you want to hold it? Okay, good. Then you will only have what you have in your hand. Great. You want that? Go ahead, girl. You know, and the beautiful thing I think about that kind of dynamic with me and God is like, I've given you a lot to be fairly successful on your own. Yeah. Right? So go, if you want to hold on to that thing and do and work and, you know, produce, you know, based out of your own strength, right? Yeah. You will probably be relatively successful. But if you give it to me, I could blow your mind. So you can choose to let me blow your mind, or you can choose, you know, the relative cool, you alright success, right? You know, and I know that there are people who would be like, well, I'm just choosing the I because this is I can predict and this is what I know. But it doesn't. This is sort of like where my joy work comes in, because it doesn't leave room for this expansive notion of joy. And when grief and rage hit and all you got is what you got in your little hand. Yeah. You know, the opportunity to have a more expansive sense or experience of joy is lessened. So that's God and I's dynamic. It's like, okay, you want to hold it? Okay, great. I got you. I'm still here, but when you're ready to release it, then you're going to see what I've been trying to do all along.
Wow. And what did that start to look like in those early days of giving God your yes? I'm opening my hand and I'm surrendering this to you. Yeah. What started to happen?
I think the first piece of it was in my relationships. I remember sitting in my apartment in West Philadelphia on my couch, crying my eyes out because I wanted to be in relationship. You know, I wanted a husband.
I get that.
You know, and or at that point, can I get a boyfriend? Like I'll try to do right, Lord. Just give me, you know. And I remember crying, and then I got this overwhelming peace that said, you know, it's on the way.
Yeah.
You know, and not too long after that, I met my husband. So that's what I began to see in my writing career. Not too long, I'd say maybe about 8 years after that, I got tenure at the college where I was teaching. And then after that, you know, book deals started to happen and the ghostwriting started to happen. And I was just like, oh, like, as I began to release what my writing career would look like, you know, because I'm thinking like, I'm going to create my own company and independent. And that was great. And I still believe that we need these independent entities to put work out in the world that oftentimes mainstream doesn't want or doesn't see the value in. I'm all for that. And will continue to work in that realm. However, there was another path. And I think I had strayed away from the path because I didn't feel like it was enough. You know, I didn't think I was I had this interesting mix of scholarly, but more accessible. And then there's the faith piece. And then and I had all of these different parts of me that didn't fit in any one category. And I didn't know that any mainstream press would see my value. And so I just accepted that as being true, and it was not. And as soon as I decided, okay, well, I'm going to send this pitch out, or I'm going to send this proposal, I'm going to do whatever. That's when stuff started opening up. And I'm like, okay, trust you. Okay, I got it. You know?
That's a beautiful feeling, you know, to jump full in and trust God with it, and then to see the fruit.
Yeah.
After you put out your first work, what did that feel like, and what did that encourage you to do next after that?
My initial work, I had done some poetry collections very early on, in the early 2000s. And then in 2004, I wrote my first novel. And that novel, I published it independently along with some subsequent novels. And in that particular season, I was hustling. I was talking about my book at the beauty salon and doing book signings at the beauty salon. I was literally that. I got my book in the trunk of my car, you know. I started a magazine called Anointed, a magazine. I was very, again, much in this realm of do it myself. And then the ghostwriting opportunities came about, and I'm like, oh, so I can make money helping other people write their stories. And so the idea of being a midwife and helping people birth their stories and writing in their voices was intriguing. It was interesting to me. It was also very lucrative, and it allowed me to be able to fund the independent work that I was doing. But even still, God was like, but there's more. Like, yes, that's great because that's going to pay your bills. And, you know, that's wonderful. You'll begin to build a reputation as a writer. But it wasn't until I got the book deal for Black Joy that I was like, oh, what God has given me, the stories that I have in my own brain are valuable at a much larger scale. And so I think the deal with Black Joy in 2020 shifted everything. It also required me to think bigger of myself.
Let's talk some more about Black Joy. Love that. We love that. We love talking about joy and justice. And as a Black woman, we live at a very interesting intersectionality because we experience everything about being Black and everything about being a woman at the same time. What was going through your mind, and what space were you in before you were writing that proposal, and then as you were writing that proposal? What prompted you to see that as a something that was needed in the community to talk about?
Yeah. So I entered this whole discussion around joy and Black joy in particular through grief. In 2018, a white man walked into a grocery store and decided that Black people would die that day. And one of those individuals happened to be my Aunt Vicky or my cousin Vicky. You know, Black folks at a certain age, they aunt. So my Aunt Vicky was one of his victims in that moment. And it really messed me up. Because up until that point, I had been blogging and writing about social justice issues and Trayvon Martin and all of the things that were going on. But there's something about when it becomes concrete.
Yeah.
Right. I was writing in the abstract. This was very real. It hit my family. It hit my home. It was a whole thing in my hometown. I'd spent months unable to go into grocery stores, and it was just a tough time. And as I'm going through this, I'm simultaneously working on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts at the college where I'm teaching. And we're getting a lot of hostility and pushback. And every day it was really challenging. And so that following year, my body broke down. It said enough. And so I spent 6 to 8 months pretty much bedridden. I could not move, went to doctors, couldn't figure out what was going on. I was also going into therapy. And one day, just out of the blue, my therapist asked me, Tracey, what does joy feel like in your body? And I could not answer her. If she had asked me what rage felt like, bet, I got it. She asked me what grief, yep, I got that too. But I could not locate joy. And that began my work. And as I began to figure out what joy felt like in my body, I began to think about how my ancestors were able to hold joy simultaneously in these vessels with rage and grief, righteous rage, right? At the injustices that they were living through and seeing. And so I got to writing about it. I got to talking about it. And I happened to write a article for the Washington Post about Black joy as resistance, centering my daughter, because what I noticed was she had a level of freedom that I just couldn't touch. And, I could say, oh, well, I gave her that freedom, right? Because I'm her mom. But there was just a sense of liberty that she moved in that I longed for. And there was a particular scenario that I wrote about in the article where her freedom stood in opposition, by this time it's 2020, to the very contentious election season that was happening that year, as well as the racial uprisings that were happening that year. And so I wrote this piece and it took off, and I got all kinds of, messages from folks who didn't understand why I was putting a color on joy, and what do you mean Black joy? Everybody has access to joy. And that ended up with me sort of putting this proposal together for a book on the subject matter, but really positioning the book as sort of my own journey of unpacking joy in my own life and in the life of my ancestors and my mother and my mother's mother and my great-grandmother. And that's sort of how the book was born. After I got the deal and I actually had to sit down and write the book, I will say that it was probably the most liberated I felt on the page. I allowed myself the freedom to just tell the story. And so much of, I think, what Black joy is, our joy stands in defiance to the prevailing narrative, right? It stands in defiance to the dehumanization that we've felt and feel. And it's a form of resistance, but also our ancestors understood that it wasn't just resistance, because if we position our joy only as resistance, then we're centering the thing that we're resisting, right?
That's right.
It's also a way to heal. regardless of what happens outside, it is our joy is a way to right size ourselves when that righteous rage and that grief becomes too much. And so I began to look back over my life as I'm writing these stories and seeing these moments where I thought I was being overwhelmed by grief and rage, but really joy was showing up in spurts at first, and then more here and then more there. And I got a chance to do on the page something that I had not done, which is mine my memories. Right. And so when we first started talking, we talked about like how I was holding, the good memories of my childhood with the always wanting to get out, get away from that city. Well, I got a chance writing Black Joy to go back. And there's a piece called Leaving Louisville on it, and another one talking about my first love in high school, right? Like these moments where those memories were big and they were, they informed me, right? And I got to sit in the joy of it. And feel that joy in my body in the way that I had not before. So it was a wonderful, challenging experience to write that book. But it was also probably the best demonstration of my surrender to God in my writing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's beautiful, because I don't know if all of us can say that we've experienced that kind of liberating joy. And I think that's a worthwhile goal for us to have. What are some things that our listeners can do to cultivate that joy, just from your own experience, observations, spiritual insight? What do you think those are things we can do?
So there's a couple of things. One, I think it's a mistake to believe that you have to go find joy. I think I invite everyone to unearth the joy that exists already, right? And so I think when we shift the way we think, we're not necessarily thinking of joy as like, oh, I'm about to take a trip with my girls to Essence Fest, right? Which, hey, is a joyful moment, right? Like is a good thing. But if we understand that there's an undercurrent of joy that can be ever present. And if you're a believer, you know that joy is a person.
Yes.
Right? So there's an undercurrent that can exist when you're not particularly happy.
Yes.
In the book, I make this distinction between happiness and joy, right? Happiness is this temporary moment by moment thing, right? I'm happy in this moment because I get to talk to you, right? I'm happy in this moment because I'm riding the roller coaster. Wee, yay, that's fun, right? But joy exists as an undercurrent regardless of what's happening external, right?
Yes.
And the reason why it's hard to give ourselves permission to experience it or to unearth it is because oftentimes we have allowed those other very valid, very real emotions to be so big in our bodies that it's kind of smushed our joy down, right? So rage and grief are like really big, and then we get this little bitty joy over here in the corner, right?
Preaching.
But we still don't have to go outside of ourselves to find it. We just have to give ourselves permission to have joy, to access that joy, to call it up.
Yes.
Right? One of the first things that my therapist asked me to do was, she said, once you figure out what joy feels like in your body, and I figured that out by, in a couple of different ways, but one of the ways I figured that out was by taking my daughter to the playground. And she loved to get on the swings. And she was like, Mommy, come get on the swings with me. And I got on the swings, and it triggered a memory of being 10 or 9 and getting on the swings and loving it, and I began to feel my body flood. Like I got warm in my chest and so my therapist was like, okay, so now that you have the physiological sensations of joy, like committed to memory, call it up when you need it. Right? So when you are scrolling through social media and, some artist that was deeply part of your cultural upbringing passes away, right? And you want to just break down, cry, but also know that you have access to those sensations of joy to right size yourself so you don't go off the deep end.
Right.
And so I would offer that to everyone that's watching or listening. Like, it's not that joy doesn't exist and you got to go out and get it.
Yeah.
God has given you joy. Joy is a fruit of the Spirit.
Amen.
Right? And all what you might have to do is surrender to it.
Yeah.
In your life, and also recognize that it's not some big dramatic effort, right? It might just mean going to the park and getting on the swings when you've had a bad day.
Yeah. Which that sounds really good right now. I may have to do that today.
I just might do it on the way home. Right.
I have the park pictured in my mind right here. I'm like, yeah,
Yes.
I think I'm going to actually take a trip there. I'll let you know.
Please do.
Yeah. So when you think about your journey as a ghostwriter as well, what is that like? And how do you make concerted efforts to make sure that you're protecting your voice while helping others find theirs?
Yeah. It's very challenging sometimes, depending on the story. Most of the time I end up writing for people that I really connect with, right? And so I have to be careful that there's no overlap, right? And that I'm specifically writing in their voice. So from a technical standpoint, that's interviews and transcripts and, transforming the way that they speak and their cadence and their stories onto the page in a way that's really beautiful that someone would want to read, right? So that's from like a craft standpoint. But from like just protection of my own heart and voice, I've talked about the body already a lot. I'm a very somatic oriented person. So I've done things like I've created a scent for a client and then I create another scent for a client using essential oils or something like that. And so I will literally take essential oil for one client and as I'm working and writing, I will have that scent. And then I can wash it off.
Wow.
And so the act of washing it off sort of removes it so that I can go on to another client or go on to my own work and not bring their voice into my work or take my voice into their work, right? And that's because I know how God, in his just incredible, magnificent, has made our bodies. He's made our bodies with this olfactory system that connects to our brain. That's the reason why when we smell cookies, we remember grandmama cooking the cookies, right? When we smell greens, we're like, oh, I remember that time. Those memories are connected.
Yeah.
And so for me, understanding that, I'm like, oh, okay, so I can create safety for myself in this storytelling by using scent. And so it doesn't always work, because life is just like that. But it is just one of many ways that I try to ensure that I am, number one, being, having integrity to the project that I'm on, but also, protecting the work that I'm working on for myself.
Yeah. There's a theme that keeps coming up with everything that you're sharing that is connected to the sense of embodiment and being present and valuing that and making sure that's a priority. Do you think the church, let's talk about the American church, maybe the Black church, from your joy and justice lens. How do you think we're doing with that?
I think it could stand. It could stand to be better. I think that it's important to make a distinction between the American church, right? Western church and the Black church, right? I think the Black church often has very much embraced embodiment in very particular ways, right? So grandmama rocking back and forth in the pew, right, is a form of bilateral stimulation, right? She didn't have that language for it, but it's literally a rocking, that is a soothing act, right? So it's soothing the central nervous system, right? So as she's listening to this song that's moving her spirit, she's also taking whatever trauma, whatever pain, whatever got on her nerves this past week, right? And she's able to move it around in her body, right? So I think that there is, while there may not have been the language for it, there's always been this sense of a somatic experiencing within the Black church. Even when we start talking about shouting and, just praise and worship and those kinds of things. Maybe less so in the larger Western church. But when I talking about embodiment, I'm also talking about stillness. And I think that that's an area that the church could stand to return to. And I'm very clear about that language because it's not foreign to the church. It's just I think there's such a disconnect, especially now when we've become so immersed in power, right? As a means to so-called accomplish God's will in the earth, right? When the all-powerful doesn't need our notions of power to accomplish what needs to happen in the earth. And so there's that. But I am, and on my faith journey, I've embraced Christian contemplative practices, right? So meditation is very much a part of my life. Stillness is very much a part of my life. Embracing quiet and so I can actually hear. And I think some of the noisiness in the body right now in particular is a result of a resistance to getting still. Right. And being and not even just getting still, but getting still and being willing to surrender to what we hear, even if that means conviction. And even if that means a complete 180 turn in the direction of justice and righteousness. Right? There is a resistance and an unwillingness because the voices of power and the voices of white supremacy and the voices of patriarchy are very much ever present and very loud. Right? It's loud in our interpretations of scripture. It's loud in how we enact and be community. And as a result, you get theocracy instead of, a beloved community.
Right. You said a lot there, and that was good. Talk to us about HeARTspace.
HeARTspace is my baby. And it's been on a little bit of a hiatus lately as I began to kind of regroup based on where the world is and where our country is right now. But what it initially began is I really wanted to create space for people to bring their full selves, right? And whatever that may look like, and receive love through the arts, through storytelling. And so we had initially done what we called a HeARTspace pop-up, where yes, there was books, because with me, there's always going to be books. There's always going to be book signings and that kind of thing. But there's also art. There was also what we called the listening station, where we would set up a time period where anybody could just come in, sit down, and have somebody listen to them. There would be no judgment. There'd be no but this is what you should do. It wasn't positioned as therapy or advice or whatever. Some people need to give it air, right? They need to take the stuff that's on the inside and put it on the outside so that it doesn't kill them, right? And so we did the listening station, and there was just a lot of spaces. We've done workshops around releasing onto the canvas. So it was an art workshop for those who had experienced sexual assault. So I just wanted to create a space where people could be and maybe get still enough to hear God. And so that began in sort of these pop-up events. And then the pandemic happened. So we had to press pause on some things, but now I'm shifting what HeARTspace might look like. So we've done some digital things online, creating a digital space. In 2020, right when the pandemic happened, we created sort of a digital board where people can come and just ask for prayer or just post on this digital billboard what they were feeling in that moment. And so it's evolving right now. But I look forward to see what God does with HeARTspace because I'm totally open for him to use it however he sees fit.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. So when it comes to women embracing our voices, what would you say to someone that's listening and trying to find who they are, find the courage to speak out, find the courage to take up space? Mm-hmm. What would be your encouragement to them?
At some point, we have to do it afraid.
That's good.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I can sit here and I've done this, right? Like I've sat and ran down all the reasons why I couldn't, write and direct a short film, or write a play or whatever the thing that was, pressing me, that was in my heart to do. And I think it's easy to come up with all of the reasons why you shouldn't take up space, because again, internal family systems is a theoretical approach where it says that we have these parts of us that have been formed over the course of our lives, right? And these parts have different roles. Some are managers where they manage you and they want to others want to keep you safe, right? One will blow up, whatever, sabotage whatever in order to keep you safe. And so I think sometimes when we're presented with an opportunity to take up space, those voices start to talk and they start to say, we can't do that. And really it's the 5-year-old who tried to speak up at one time and nobody listened. And so the 5-year-old, as my therapist would say, is now driving the bus when nobody would let a 5-year-old drive the bus, right? So, but the tendency for a lot of us is to try to kick those people off the bus when really we just need to tell them to have a seat and to trust God, trust that the journey that I've been on has allowed me to arrive to this point and I can make the decision for us. And so fear is one of those, that fear lady on my bus is strong, right? Like she's like, girl, you don't know what's going to happen. What if your daughter goes out here and this happens to her? Or what if your husband goes out and this, or what if you don't make it, or nobody likes the book, or it doesn't make the blah, blah, blah bestsellers list, or whatever. Right?
Right.
And yet we do it. It is Christ in the garden saying, I really would love for you to take this cup, Father. Like, if you really want to just, but you know what? Not my will.
Yeah.
And I think practice, and so I think sometimes doing it afraid, sometimes people will do it one time. But I think we have to understand that it is a practice of doing it afraid. Doing it afraid one time probably isn't going to make that fear sit down somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Making it a practice to get quiet, hear God say X, Y, Z, fear show up and say no, do it in spite of that fear.
Yeah.
And the practice of that over and over again will teach fear, will create new neural pathways in your brain, right? That will say, you know what? Yes, it is an option to not do it because we've worn that groove in our brain for 40 some odd years that says, you know what, we should not. Yeah. But we also have created these new neural pathways in our brain that says, you know what, the last 5 times we did that and we trusted what God said, it worked out for our good.
Yeah.
All those things worked out for our good.
Amen.
Right? So maybe we'll continue this path. And then that neural pathway starts to die. It starts to be the less likely the route that our decision making will go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So take up space, girl. And when you don't feel like it, do it anyway.
That's such a good word, because I'm with you. I grew up in such a way that one, proximity to the Black Baptist tradition. So you weren't allowed to do certain things. And also believing that my voice didn't belong and that it wouldn't be missed. So I might as well just not. So I'm sure there's plenty of other people that have grown up like that or are experiencing that now.
Yeah.
What do you think is being cultivated in the incubator of your mind, your soul, your being right now that God is stirring up to one day be released?
Oof. My brain can be a hot mess of ideas and creativity and all those kinds of things. I know that my next work, I signed a book deal earlier this year for a book on Black courage. It's called A Beautiful Terror.
Love it.
And it really is about the ways in which our ancestors have been able to hold, to remain courageous in the midst of the terrors that they have they've had to experience, internal and external.
Yeah.
And so I know that, and it's inevitable, that whenever I'm compelled to write something, I will then begin to experience that thing. So the joy journey that I've been on has now been shifted to the courage journey, right? Not that I'm not still, wrestling with joy and Black joy and what that looks like, but that courage has been, what does courage look like? And I think it's also because of the moment that we're in this world, right? And people sleep on survival, right? But survival is how we get to thriving, right? Yes. If you never survive, you don't get to thrive.
That's right.
Right? And so I think I'm in this season where I am sort of flipping what I thought about survival, right? And really exploring survival through the lens of courage, right? Because it takes a kind of courage to keep going and to survive and to do what it takes to survive.
Yeah.
And looking at that through Black folk and how we've been able to do that and maintain ourselves. Maintain who we are as God's people.
Yeah. How do you think you would have defined courage before starting to think about this book and the approach you want to take? And how do you think you're defining courage now that you're in it? Or is there no difference?
I always understood that you don't have courage without fear present, right?
Yeah.
And I think for the longest time, fear was something that I wanted to push away. It was one of those voices on the bus that I wanted off the bus.
Yeah.
I don't want fear here.
Yeah.
Right? Once you go away, stop talking to me. But I don't think that is actually useful, right? I think the awareness of the presence of fear is actually what we wield in order to get to courage. Right? I honestly think that. And I love that scripture even shows this moment. No, I can't say it's necessarily fear, but of vulnerability in Christ, right? In the garden, right? Because really what it's showing us is that we have the ability to experience those kinds of vulnerabilities, and fear being one of them, and yet still survive and pursue and be courageous in our pursuing. So I think before I probably was just kind of call courage bravery and really not really make the connection between it and fear. And now as I'm reading, because right now I'm sort of in a reading phase. So as I'm reading more and more about this book sort of has a genealogical component to it. So I'm doing a lot of research on my third great grandmother who was enslaved in Wilmington, North Carolina. And so as I am imagining her life and imagining what she might have been afraid of, all the fears that might have come, I'm also realizing that fear was wielded into a courageous migration from North Carolina to Virginia to Kentucky, right?
Yeah.
And so what does that mean for me and my own migrations, whether it's a physical migration from one point to the other, or whether it's an internal migration of from one surrender from faith to faith and glory to glory. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. What is your dream for your daughter? You said that she, I'm going to try to capture this similar to how you did, but that she exhibits a joy and has tapped into like a different dimension of joy. What is your dream for her as she gets older and continues to exhibit Black joy?
Yeah. Her joy is such a a liberty. And I wish for her that she retains that sense of freedom. I'm already seeing now, like that was when I wrote that article, she was 10, like she's 14 now, and I'm seeing the vicissitudes of life, right, begin to shape her. And I'm just praying for a covering or a hedge that it doesn't shift her notions of herself and who she's being called to be. My daughter, if anybody follows me online, she's a star, right? Like she's a singer and she wants to be on Broadway and all of these kinds of things. And, but I know what can intervene on that, the self-talk, right? That can, again, the people that are forming on her bus even now based on her interactions at school and her friends and mom and dad and all those kinds of things. And I just pray that God saves a little bit of that free-spiritedness and that sense that I can do anything. That liberty, I hope that he can preserve that, or if not, at least help her to recall it when she needs it.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful. As we get ready to close, one thing I'd love to hear is how people envision their legacy and what they want their witness to be as they're remembered for generations after they go on to be with the Lord. What is your desire? What is your dream that you would be able to leave behind for generations after?
It's hard for me to think about legacy. But I do hope that people see me and my work as authentic and honest and seeking, and that it gives them permission to be honest and authentic and seeking, and that they will give them permission to do their healing work. They would give themselves that somehow through my life and through my witness and through my my work, that they will see the value in giving themselves permission to know joy, to unearth joy, to work toward healing. I don't believe we get to a maximum healed state until we get to glory, right? Like, but I think that I hope that through my work and through my witness, people will feel compelled to begin their journey, whatever it looks like. If I do that, I feel like I will have lived out the calling on my life. And, yes, I'm a writer. Yes, I'm an artist. Yes, I'm a storyteller. But all of those things are just vessels for what I think is the message of healing and joy that I hope people take and run with, and hope that the next generation, my daughter included, will take it and transform it into even something greater. So when I pass that baton, my ancestors gave me access. There are things I can do that they could not do. I will hopefully pass along to them a kind of resilience and a step along the healing journey that they could then go further with. And hopefully in their going further, our people can be free.
That's just so beautifully put.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracey, for your amazing work. Thank you for being here with us on Can I Get a Witness and sharing your story. And we're looking forward to staying in touch, especially about that next piece.
Yes.
Looking forward to that. Hey, family. Thanks for spending time with us on Can I Get a Witness? It's always an honor to share stories that remind us of who we are and whose we are. Follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, at The Witness VCC, and visit thewitnessinc.com to join the movement and stay tuned. Until next time, keep shining, keep showing up, and keep bearing witness.